Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Representatives from around the world gathered at the United Nations headquarters in New York City today as President Biden addressed the General Assembly. It was his first speech at the UN as president. A government shutdown and economic recession could be right around the corner. Democrats and Republicans in Congress are debating the details to avoid an economic catastrophe. COVID-19 vaccines for kids under 12 come this fall. That's Dr. Fauci's prediction. But another doctor, Peter McCullough, explains that the risks may outweigh the benefits. NTD gets San Francisco locals' perspectives on mask and vaccine mandates after a month under strict regulations, in which the mayor was seen in a club without a mask. Authorities are clearing the encampment under the Del Rio Bridge in Texas. Many are leaving on their own for fear of deportation. NTD spoke with an immigration expert to find out more. Leaders around the world gathered at the United Nations today. President Biden expressed plans to lead the United States in the new era of diplomacy rather than military power. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
We are here right outside of the United Nations, and leaders have been talking throughout the day about various issues around the world. This was President Biden's first time to speak at the United Nations as president.
Simply put, we stand, in my view, at an inflection point in history. A more peaceful, prosperous future for all people.
He said instead of fighting wars of the past, he is focusing resources on the challenges of a collective future.
Ending this pandemic, facing the threat of terrorism as it stands today.
Biden also took the time to reaffirm America's many commitments around the world, including to the EU, NATO, ASEAN, and the African Union. After Biden's speech, he met with the Australian Prime Minister.
The United States has no closer or more reliable ally than Australia. Our nations have stood together for a long, long time, and we can rely on one another, and that's really a reassuring thing.
On Wednesday, President Biden will host a virtual COVID-19 summit, and leaders will be urged to help deal with various pandemic-related issues around the world. Biden also invited members of the Pacific Quad Alliance, including the prime ministers from India, Australia, and Japan, to Washington on Friday. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
And the United States plans to donate an additional 500 million COVID-19 vaccines to nations around the world. This will raise the total number of vaccines that America is sharing to more than 1 billion doses, according to a source familiar with the plans. Biden says he will announce additional commitments on Wednesday during the global COVID-19 summit. And the House will vote on a funding bill this week to prevent a government shutdown. But the bill includes a move to suspend the debt ceiling until next year. Economists liken this to writing the government a blank check. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more details from Capitol Hill.
The House this week will be voting on a bill to fund the government. Now, this bill is a necessary bill in order to avoid a government shutdown. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Leader Chuck Schumer have included in this necessary government funding bill a measure to suspend the national debt ceiling without a limit until December of next year.
By simply suspending the debt limit. This is akin to, let's say you have a credit card and you have a $10,000 credit limit. This is akin to the credit card company telling you, hey, there's no cap at all. You want to borrow $100,000, you want to borrow $1 million, go for it. If Congress wants to raise the debt ceiling, it should be raised by a specific amount, and there should be safeguards put in place in return that will guarantee that government spending will only grow by a specific amount.
The Treasury Secretary has repeatedly told Congress they must raise the debt ceiling to avoid an economic catastrophe, and President Biden sent a letter to states warning of an economic recession to come if the debt issue is not resolved soon. If the debt ceiling is not raised, the U.S. could default on its debt, meaning that federally funded programs such as Medicaid, WIC for Mothers, disaster relief, education programs, and more could be cut off. It would be the first time in U.S. history such a financial crisis has happened. But Griffith says suspending the debt with no limitations to avoid a default could be just as bad.
Whether it's a default or not a default, the consequences of not getting the spending under control are very similar. Okay, so we don't default on the debt. We just print all the money we need to actually pay the interest payments and repay the debt. Well, that means that you're going to have an increase overall in prices, and our standard of living is going to decline relative to what it would have been.
Republicans plan to oppose the debt ceiling suspension, and it likely won't make it through the Senate without the 10 Republican votes needed.
The bill that the Speaker Pelosi is bringing through this week will not become law. They're going to have to go back to the drawing board.
But Democrats are saying this should be a bipartisan effort, since Republicans did help to accrue some of that national debt under the Trump administration. But Republicans are pushing back on this, saying that they should not have to bear the burden of raising the debt ceiling at a time when Democrats are trying to pass trillions of dollars in new spending on social welfare programs and clean energy projects. Now, at the end of the day, Congress will have to pass bills to fund the government and to raise the debt ceiling. It's just a matter of how they go about doing it and if they can get it done in time to avoid both a government shutdown and an economic recession. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And the FBI announced today that they identified the human remains in Grand Teton National Park as 22-year-old Gabby Petito. They can conclude that another person killed her, but haven't found out about the exact cause of death. The woman disappeared months after she set out on a cross-country road trip with her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie. Authorities continue to search a swampy Florida preserve area for Laundrie. And Dr. Anthony Fauci expects the FDA to approve COVID-19 vaccines for children under 12 this fall. He made this prediction over the weekend, but not everyone agrees that vaccines are necessary for kids this young. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Dr. Anthony Fauci told ABC that he expects the FDA to authorize COVID-19 vaccines for children 5 to 11 this fall.
It will certainly be this fall. When you talk about the rollout for vaccines, again, there'll be a bit of a difference in time frame, maybe by a couple to a few weeks between Pfizer and Moderna and others.
Fauci says by that time, the FDA should have enough data about the Pfizer vaccine's impact on children. Ultimately, this federal agency will determine whether children 5 to 11 can be given the vaccine. According to Pfizer, results from their phase 2 trial on this age group shows a favorable safety profile and robust neutralizing antibody responses. The company says they used a third of the normal dose for this age group, 10 micrograms instead of 30. But not all agree that children this young need to be vaccinated against COVID-19.
I thought, based on my understanding of the vaccines and the clinical trials and the risks in young people, that really no one under age 30 should receive a COVID-19 vaccine.
Dr. Peter McCullough is an internist, a cardiologist, and an epidemiologist, certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine. He's also the editor-in-chief of 2 medical journals.
And what do you think parents should know if they consider getting their kids vaccinated against COVID-19?
Parents should understand that the risk of myocarditis with the Pfizer vaccine, which is the only one that's EUA approved for that age range. Moderna is coming along shortly, and I'm not sure about J&J, but the parents should know that the chances of developing severe myocarditis and requiring hospitalization are greater than developing COVID and requiring hospitalization. COVID is very easily treatable in young people using a sequence of drugs that can involve something as simple as an inhaler, the use of oral prednisone, the use of aspirin, doxycycline, or zithromycin in combination. So it's very easily treated. The myocarditis is not easily treated. It can be fatal.
A recently published study suggests that healthy young boys have a considerably higher chance of being hospitalized with vaccine-associated heart inflammation than with COVID. That study is yet to be peer-reviewed. In any case, the CDC says vaccines are safe and effective, and they recommend them to everyone 12 and up. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
It's been a month since San Francisco first required customers to show proof of vaccination when going into certain businesses. NTD's Jason Blair asked what residents think of it so far.
San Francisco is requiring that customers show proof of receiving a COVID vaccine at certain businesses like restaurants and gyms. It's now 1 month into the mandate, and I'm going to go out and see how people think it's going.
I honestly think it's a good idea. It's a good push in the right direction.
But I just think it's really tough on these small businesses that are doing such a great job.
No problem at all.
According to the city, masks are still required regardless of vaccination status. However, recently, San Francisco Mayor London Breed was filmed at a jazz club dancing without a face mask. When asked about the incident, Breed told KPIX5, "My drink was sitting at the table. I got up and started dancing because I was feeling the spirit and I wasn't thinking about a mask."
She needs to wear a mask.
Jazz to me is one of the great music forms that's about spontaneity. So I think she was probably immersing herself into that.
Me and my sister, we dance all the time. In Melrose, North Shore, South Shore, it doesn't matter. We wear masks when we dance.
I think a lot of people are just really almost like desperate to return back to normal.
My sense is that she was just seeing it in hindsight and would do it differently.
It could be easy to get lost in the moment, but that shouldn't, just your wanting to be normal just shouldn't disregard, be at the cost of everyone else's safety.
Other U.S. cities with similar mandates are New York and New Orleans. So far, there's no word about how long the mandate will last. Some wonder if the regulations will spread to other areas in California. As of yet, nothing has been announced. Jason Blair, NTD News, San Francisco.
A group of people from Stanford University blamed one of their own professors for Florida's COVID death rates. NTD's Cynthia Kai spoke with the professor who was targeted.
Earlier this month, individuals at Stanford University linked Professor of Medicine Jay Bhattacharya to COVID death counts in Florida. The university has so far taken no action in support or against the professor.
So Governor DeSantis had tweeted a picture of me with a quote that I said during one of these policy roundtables, where I said that vaccinating the old protects the vulnerable, which is true. Vaccinating the old does protect the vulnerable.
Some anonymously hung posters with Bhattacharya's portrait were reported around campus.
The poster had a picture of me, a big picture of me, and then it circled Governor DeSantis' name, circled me, and then put up next to it a graph of Florida death rates from COVID.
At the same time, a group of faculty members circulated a petition. According to an article in The Federalist, the petition allegedly demanded the university president to clarify for the faculty the limits of public pronouncements when proclaiming on public health policy.
It didn't name me directly, but it quoted me during one of these Florida roundtables on child masking, where I said, a true statement, which is that there are no high-quality randomized studies evaluating masks in children.
Bhattacharya explained randomized trials are necessary in scientific research for developing evidence and determining the effects of interventions.
And then it asked the Stanford president to censor me, in effect, to say that this sort of opinion by Stanford professors, fully tenured, is out of line with Stanford with Stanford's values or something, and basically, in effect, asked to suppress my academic freedom and my free speech.
The petition was circulated within the university and kept off social media. Bhattacharya said Stanford has not taken any actions against the posters, petition, or his position in the university.
I mean, I've gotten emails and communication from professors around the world. This has been a terrible time for free discussion in science. People have been fired for signing the Great Barrington Declaration, for instance. People have lost their jobs. People have had essentially mob campaigns against them, whispering campaigns to try to discredit them, slander.
The Great Barrington Declaration is a one-page document that urges against COVID-related lockdowns. It has been signed by public health scientists and medical practitioners around the world, including from Harvard, Oxford, Tel Aviv universities, and more.
I don't believe that intimidation campaigns have any place in scientific discussion. I'm not going to act. I'm going to continue to speak up.
He believes disagreements in academia should be addressed through conversations, debates, and more research. Bhattacharya is one of many professionals in public health who have been speaking out about current pandemic-related policies. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
And speaking of masks, Los Angeles County is sticking up for those maskless celebrities seen at the Emmys. The county said the Emmy Award ceremony is a television production, which means the mask policy doesn't apply to them, and that everyone appearing in the audience was fully vaccinated. What's happened here has some people saying in jest that COVID-19 doesn't affect celebrities. The county's public health website has a poster which currently says everyone, regardless of vaccination status, must wear a mask at all public indoor settings, venues, gatherings, and public and private businesses in the county. An Emmys producer said everyone in the audience tested negative, but that didn't stop actor Seth Rogen from taking a few jabs at the setup while he was up on stage. And a city in California's Bay Area is investigating its 100th homicide so far this year. Its police department will also be implementing a new use of force policy. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more.
According to the Oakland Police Department, officers are looking into its 100th homicide this year. Since last Monday, the city has seen 10 homicides. 4 happened in 3 days, including over the weekend.
I hope that others in this city take the time to recognize the lives that have been lost and talk about solutions. This is not about finger pointing. This is not about political issues. This is not about should we have more officers or how we address gun violence. This is about a crisis in our community that is taking lives.
The victims' identities are not released.
We have officers dedicated to specifically violent crime. Since we started in early April, we've made around almost 40 arrests for homicides using intelligence, information, and precision-based policing to go out there and just find not just those that are committing minor offenses, but those that are out there hurting our community, those that are pulling triggers and making senseless decisions to use guns in our communities.
The department's ceasefire strategy will continue to be their primary strategy for reducing violence and collaborating with different departments. Last year, the Oakland Police Commission developed and approved a new use of force policy. Starting this week, the Oakland Police Department may train its officers with the new policy. It consists of a series of de-escalation tactics and allows other officers to intervene if they see another officer using inappropriate force. According to the police chief, the Oakland Police Department is experiencing a severe staffing shortage. They currently have about 695 officers, the lowest in a decade.
And it's also the highest level of violence we've seen in nearly 10 years. So those things coincide to me. I believe that there's a need for additional officers, additional resources to support our efforts. We've lost over 46 officers from this department in the last 4 months.
He said they need police academies to make up for the lost officers. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
And earlier this year, a mass shooting in Silicon Valley took the lives of 10 rail yard employees. And recently, a California shop owner was honored for reporting a suspicious person, which may have prevented another fatal massacre. NTD's David Lamb speaks to the shop owner for the details.
It was a midnight of early July when Farouk Mamiadov noticed a man through his business's security camera.
He was kind of just looking around. At first, I didn't really think much of it, but later when he started going through the storage and digging through stuff, he looked a little suspicious, so I decided to call it in.
He said police responded quickly and arrested 32-year-old Wesley Martinez around the block. According to a statement by the County District Attorney's Office, the suspect had a illegal arsenal in his truck that included a bulletproof vest, pipe bomb materials, individual bullets with "Cop Killer" inscribed on them, and racist documents.
I've had people go through here before and steal stuff, so that's why I called it in.
In mid-September, District Attorney Jeff Rosen awarded the shop owner for his initiative.
Oh, it felt great. I mean, I honestly wasn't expecting it to turn into such a big deal, but it definitely felt good to be recognized. And
Mamiadov is the owner of a used car business which has been around for 5 years. He said he recognized Martinez, who is looking to buy a sports car a few months back.
I would say if you have a bad feeling about something, if you have a gut feeling, maybe definitely call it in.
He said he watched for about a minute and a half before he called Campbell Police. All Mamiadov did was call the police, which eventually led to the arrest. But he says he doesn't consider himself a hero. He's just glad that the suspect is off the streets. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
And parents in Round Rock, Texas objected when police blocked the entrance to a school board meeting on mask mandates. 2 parents were arrested. NTD's Jason Perry spoke with one parent who wasn't allowed inside.
Christy Lee here.
Christy Lee, along with other parents, signed up to speak at last week's school board meeting over the new mask mandates. She said the seating was limited due to COVID protocols, so many of the parents showed up early to make sure they could get a seat.
Even when there were chairs available, they wouldn't let us in. So what started out very peacefully ended up getting heightened because they had positioned 2 Round Rock ISD police officers at the doors to bar us entry into this main meeting hall.
Lee said that, according to a board member, there were 18 empty seats during the meeting. A woman present at the school read the officers the law that specifies that parents are allowed to attend the school board meetings.
Section 26.007, access to board meetings. A parent is entitled to complete access to any meeting of the Board of Trustees of the school district other than the closed meeting held in compliance with subchapters D and E. They are not in closed meeting.
Did you let any of these people in?
Meeting. We should be inside of there right now.
That's true. Did you?
One parent, who is a pastor in Round Rock, attempted to bypass the officers.
He's trying to peacefully walk in. It trumps the school district's policy. Okay.
One of the fathers, his name is Jeremy Story, he was like, I'm going to put my hands behind my back and I'm going to just peacefully walk past you according to the law that's been read to you over and over again. And they push that. You can see them push him away, forcibly push him. He falls to the floor in part. It's all very back and forth.
Lee also said that at this school board meeting, unlike the previous one, people weren't notified when it was their turn to speak. But a parent who was in the meeting tried to speak up.
When he was giving his speech, he was saying, I extremely object to the rest of the parents being outside there. They can't be in there. It's against state law. And then they just cut him off and yelled with him and directed the police officers to drag him out of the meeting.
Both parents were arrested last Friday, 3 days after the meeting, reportedly for disrupting a public meeting.
It is very clearly, in my opinion, an intimidation tactic. What other parents are going to want to continue to press on if they have to worry about getting arrested and spending the night in jail just for dissent?
According to KVUE, Round Rock Independent School District released a statement saying they had abided by the Open Meetings Act. The public had access to the meeting room until capacity limits were met, and also to an overflow area where video and audio of the meeting were live streamed. Community members had the opportunity to address the board either in person or via Zoom. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton on Thursday tweeted, "Another win. Round Rock ISD has been ordered to follow Executive Order 38. No mask mandates are allowed. They are clearly illegal." The next Round Rock School Board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday. Jason Perry, NTD News.
A New York City waitress sustained injuries after a group of women attacked her. They say she uttered racial slurs, but restaurant staff say she didn't. And now Black Lives Matters wants the establishment boycotted. NTD's Arian Pazdar was at their protest.
We're here in the Upper West Side, New York City, where a Black Lives Matter protest is happening. Because last week, 3 black women from Texas wanted to dine at this Italian restaurant here, but were denied service. The waitress accused them of having false proof of vaccination cards, which are mandatory now if you want to dine in New York City. She also allegedly cursed them out with racial slurs, to which the 3 women responded with violence. The 3 women were arrested, and the waitress had to be brought to the hospital. The 3 women were led to their table along with 3 male friends after the proof of vaccination issue was resolved. That's when the waitress walked past them and allegedly used racial slurs. Surveillance footage shows one of the guests then turned around, followed the waitress outside and attacked her. The situation then escalated into a brawl. All members of the group of patrons say they heard racial slurs. All restaurant staff deny any slurs were used. The surveillance footage has no sound. Andrew Ridgey of the Hospitality Alliance says people will keep blaming each other.
Different people are going to say different things and point fingers, but at the end of the day, restaurant workers need to be respected, and no matter what the situation is, there is no situation where you can assault a restaurant worker, period.
Protesters say using the N-word is a verbal assault and that the waitress should be fired. They walked up to the restaurant's entrance, calling for people to cancel the establishment. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
The CDC is now requiring measles vaccines for Afghan refugees recently brought to the U.S. That's after authorities found several cases of measles, tuberculosis, and malaria among them. NTD's Allison Lee has more.
The CDC said Monday there have been 16 cases of measles and 4 cases of mumps among the evacuees. All the measles patients have been in isolation and their contacts have also been quarantined. The U.S. evacuated around 124,000 people from Afghanistan last month. The CDC now requires every one of them to get the measles, mumps, and rubella, or MMR vaccine, and they must also quarantine for 21 days after getting the shot. The CDC is also aware of some cases of chickenpox, tuberculosis, malaria, leishmaniasis, hepatitis A, and COVID-19 among the evacuees. The CDC wants evacuees who are currently in third countries to get the shots and complete the quarantine before they enter the U.S. The U.S. has temporarily halted flying them into the country for this reason. Measles is an extremely contagious disease. It can infect around 9 out of every 10 people coming into contact with the virus. It was declared eliminated from the U.S. in 2000, but the CDC expects more cases to spread among evacuees. That's because only 60% of the people in Afghanistan are vaccinated against this disease, and the country ranks 7th in the world for measles cases. Although not mandatory, the CDC also recommends evacuees to be vaccinated against chickenpox, polio, COVID-19, and the seasonal flu. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Coming up, results are in from the Canadian federal election. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau gets a third term, but it's a closer election than he anticipated. And stock markets are responding to the potential collapse of China's real estate giant Evergrande. How likely is it to really happen? And how would that affect the global economy? NTD speaks with an economist when we return.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
How prepared is your family if a tornado shows up at your doorstep, or a flood, or a hurricane? You can't just turn away a natural disaster. That's why it's important to go to ready.gov/plan now. It has the tools and tips you need to make an emergency plan with your family. So if disaster comes knocking, let's go. You'll be ready to help keep your family safe.
It's just a pizza.
Yes. Make a plan today.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What do today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Canadians re-elected Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party in a snap election yesterday. Trudeau called the election in mid-August, hoping to gain a majority, but instead his party got a second minority government. Here's more from NTD's Gary Bai.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau hung on to power on election night, September 20th. While mail-in ballots have yet to be counted, the Liberals secured enough seats to form a minority government.
And you have given this Parliament and this government clear direction.
Trudeau called an election 2 years ahead of schedule, hoping to be rewarded with a majority government. However, calling an election amid a pandemic seriously triggered voters. For the Liberals, the results were almost identical to that of the last election. The election cost taxpayers roughly $600 million. As of Tuesday, Trudeau's Liberals are leading or elected in 158 seats, short of the 170 seats needed for a majority. The opposition Conservatives were leading or elected in 122 seats, and they won slightly more of the popular vote than the Liberals, as they did last time. The total seats in the House of Commons is 338. During the election campaign, Trudeau wanted to make mandatory vaccination a referendum. He provoked people who are against vaccine mandates. As a result, Trudeau's campaign was constantly hounded by protesters who believe their freedom of choice is at risk. Now that Trudeau has been re-elected, many say that Canada could see further division and segregation. Trudeau disagrees.
Some have talked about division, but that's not what I see. That's not what I've seen these past weeks across the country. I see Canadians standing together.
Trudeau's Liberals started their campaign by promising to help businesses recover from the pandemic-hit economy. Their campaign hinged on increasing vaccinations and introducing a $10 a day childcare program. The Liberal platform included a $336 billion expected cumulative budget deficit over 5 years, and this time, Trudeau did not have a plan to balance the budget. Trudeau Liberals formed a majority government in 2015. He sailed through a number of ethics scandals, including the blackfish scandal, and was re-elected with a minority government in 2019. Monday night was the second time Trudeau has won a minority government. Gary Bai, NTD News, Toronto.
The surge in illegal immigrants under the Del Rio Bridge in Texas is unprecedented. Some 15,000 of them entered the area between last Monday and last Saturday. NTD's Grace Coulter speaks with a border security expert who's on the ground in Mexico talking to the migrants. He gives us an update on the situation.
That encampment is basically out here on this other riverbank.
Todd Bensman, Senior National Security Fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies, joined us Tuesday afternoon from the Mexican city of Piedras Negras, which is just across the border from Eagle Pass, Texas.
This is the bridge that's open and is being used because the other bridge about 60 miles from here is closed because that's where the migrant encampment is. So if you want to get into Mexico, you have to cross that bridge and then work your way back over to the other side of Del Rio.
Bensman's been in Del Rio and Mexico for the last several days. He's been speaking with illegal immigrants heading to the shelter of the Del Rio International Bridge, where around 15,000 gathered in the space of a week. There, federal, state, and local government agencies are now carrying out a mass effort to clear up the camp and bar any more border crossers from entering.
There's about 9,200 left in there, and they are moving immigrants out by about 2,000 to 3,000 per day in a fleet of buses that are heading to Border Patrol stations throughout the interior and in other parts of the border. And they're also flying some of the immigrants to other Border Patrol stations and other airports.
The majority of these illegal immigrants are Haitian. Bensman tells us that many are now fleeing the camp to Mexico, fearing deportation back to Haiti. This is because, he says, they've actually been living in Chile and Brazil for years.
There's a widespread misconception put out there, pervaded by immigrant advocates and Democratic lawmakers that we are seeing these Haitians and we should let them in because they are so incredibly desperate and persecuted, that they're fleeing earthquakes and presidential assassination and all this sort of thing. But none of that is true. All of that is a total lie. It's made up. These immigrants are all coming from Chile and Brazil, where they've been living for years and years in relative prosperity. There's jobs, there's work, and safety and security.
One Haitian migrant told Bensman in July that living in Chile was 1,000 times better than living in Haiti. But when asked why he was heading to the United States, he responded saying because life in the U.S. will be 1,000,000 times better.
The idea that they would be deported back to Haiti, the original sin, instead of Chile or Brazil, is a really powerful deterrent. They are running from this area. And what that shows is that's a very important tool in the kit to stop illegal immigration.
Bensman says the Biden administration's policies and repealing of Trump-era policies is responsible for the surge in illegal immigrants flocking to the U.S. border. He says despite widespread media attention, this encampment is only a tiny portion of the ongoing border crisis, which is on track to become the worst in U.S. history.
We're having 50,000 immigrants a week at least, crossing over the border or attempting to cross the border. And it's not about 15,000, it's about all of that. That gets no press attention. And I think that what's going to happen is when they do finally close this camp, everybody will say, border crisis solved. And it's far from the truth as possible. If you go 200 miles south of here, 15,000 Haitians have crossed already this morning.
Over 1.2 million illegal immigrants have been apprehended by Border Patrol this fiscal year. Both July and August topped over 200,000 apprehensions. Bensman says a change in policy is the only thing that will get this border crisis under control. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And Chinese investors are voicing concerns about real estate developer Evergrande's massive debt, despite efforts from the group's chairman to lift confidence in the firm. Beijing still shows no signs it will rescue the firm or block potential domino effects from tumbling onto the global economy.
Shares of Chinese property developer Evergrande plunged by as much as 7% on Tuesday. That's after it tumbled 10% the previous day. It has two repayment deadlines looming ahead, one this Thursday. Investors fear the giant could default on its mountain of debt and spark a failure through China's property sector and everything exposed to it, first the banks, then the broader market. Evergrande has $305 billion in liabilities, equivalent to 2% of China's GDP. The pressure to sell was high in Asia. The Hang Seng Index was at its lowest point in 11 months in morning trade. Japan's Nikkei fell nearly 2%, returning from a Monday holiday. A S&P report on Monday said there was a slim chance of Beijing bailing out the firm. S&P Global Ratings believed Beijing would only be compelled to step in if there was a far-reaching contagion causing major developers to fail and posing systemic risks to the economy. And that Evergrande failing alone would unlikely result in such a scenario. Evergrande's chairman, Hui Ga-yan, tried to downplay its debt crunch though. In a letter to staff on Tuesday, coinciding with China's Mid-Autumn Festival, he said the firm will walk out of its darkest moment and deliver property projects as pledged. Investors in Evergrande, however, remained on edge. The Chinese government has been largely quiet about Evergrande on the public holiday. There was no mention of the firm's troubles in major state media.
And just how likely is real estate giant Evergrande to collapse? And how will that potential collapse affect the global economy? NTD spoke with an economist to find out.
Evergrande's chairman wants you to believe his company is going to be just fine, but many aren't so sure.
I think that it's inevitable that Evergrande ends up defaulting because the reality of the company is that it's incapable of fulfilling its financial commitments, not just the short-term ones, but also the long-term ones. Because if you look at its cash flow generation, since 2012, it's been extremely poor.
Economist Daniel Lacaille said the company has basically been piling up debts and borrowing new debt to pay off old debt.
It's a very challenging situation. The company, on top of that, has a substantial problem of assets that are, for lack of a better word, worthless, because many of them have no demand, have not been fulfilling the level of promises that the company was giving.
And Evergrande isn't alone. Many other major developers in China are equally deep in debt and lack market demand. That's one reason the Chinese regime may not want to bail Evergrande out. It will set a bad example.
Because if one looks at the worst performer and it's bailed out, then it's almost a free-for-all to continue to misbehave, isn't it?
And even if the regime can bail out Evergrande, it may not have the money to save everyone. In fact, economists have for years been warning about the housing bubble in China. According to a study by a renowned business school in China, 1 in 5 of the country's houses are vacant, meaning there are 150 million homes with no one living in them, hence all the so-called ghost towns across the country. Lacaille also adds that the collapse of companies like Evergrande won't just affect the housing sector.
The contagion effect into other areas like finance, like the banking system, is also quite likely because these are very indebted companies with in a sector that is not small. Sector in its entirety is about 25% of the GDP of China.
And so how will all this affect the global economy? Well, Western bond funds, which have ramped up purchases of Chinese corporate bonds in recent years, are already feeling it. The Wall Street Journal reported that funds managed by Ashmore Group, BlackRock, and Pacific Investment Management, among others, are seeing sharp drops. Lacaille believes the impact on developed economies won't be very significant, other than banks that have been very exposed to emerging economies and to China. But there could be some damage done to the emerging market.
China has played a very significant role in the financing of very questionable projects all over Latin America and frontier economies in Africa. Therefore, many of these economies that have relied on Chinese lending for very, very doubtful projects are going to see a credit crunch.
And for those who firmly believe the Chinese regime will always swoop in to save the day, Lacaille says,
if one buys into a market based on the principle that the government or the central bank is going to bail you out of malinvestment, then one deserves the losses.
Penny Zhou, NTD News.
The drama of Evergrande may also spill into China's political field. A disgruntled crowd of investors and homeowners are demanding money from the real estate company. This could spur on one of the Chinese regime's biggest fears, social instability. That's especially so ahead of an important meeting coming up in 2022, the once in 5 years Party Congress, where Communist leader Xi Jinping will try to secure an unprecedented third term for himself. And it's going to cost a little more to send stuff with FedEx. The company announced its shipping rates are going up in January. The hikes apply to all U.S. domestic and U.S. export and import services. Home delivery is expected to go up nearly 6%, while freight customers may see an increase of almost 8%. FedEx says these price bumps, quote, reflect incremental costs associated with the challenging operating environment. FedEx customers might also start paying more this year. In November, some FedEx shipments will have a fuel surcharge. And Google plans to buy a nice new office building in New York City for about $2 billion. Other tech companies are also investing in prime real estate, even as hybrid work models become more common. Google says it will complete the deal for the St. John's Terminal site in New York City in the first quarter of next year. Google currently leases the site. The investment comes at a time when most Google employees are working remotely and don't have to come to the office until at least January. Tech giants have been taking advantage of lower office building prices across the United States. And for many years, a district in Paris has been dealing with serious drug problems. The situation only got worse with the pandemic, making life a nightmare for local residents. NTD correspondent David Vives has the testimony from one of them.
The beautiful Montmartre Hill in Paris attracts millions of tourists each year, but just a few hundred yards from there, the outlook of the city changes. For years, Paris' 18th district has been plagued by robbery and poverty, but the worst issue is the crack epidemic. You can often see crack cocaine consumers on the streets in some neighborhoods, and the situation has become unbearable for many local residents. Tariq Sassi is one of them. He describes the situation as a nightmare.
What we are living since the beginning of the epidemic, it's a true nightmare. My wife can't even go out to the grocery store. We have asked city authorities many times to do something, but without success.
The situation has existed for years, but the number of crack consumers has recently increased. That's despite a €9 million plan in 2019 to tackle the problem. Illegal immigrants without lodging solutions live nearby the crack dealers, and unfortunately, they fall prey to narcotic drugs, adding fuel to the flame. There had once been a room and then a garden dedicated to crack consumption, but they had to close as they became a site for drug dealing. The Paris mayor said Tuesday that she has no solution and blamed the Paris police chief for not taking actions, and the police chief blamed the mayor in return. To pay for their doses, some drug users commit crimes. On July 12th, a crime shocked the neighborhood.
There was a 12-year-old autistic teen named Kellyan. He went out to buy some food, and we found him days later in a tent for drug addicts. He died in horrible conditions.
Following his death, 5 men assaulted drug dealers in revenge, but more often than not, more and more residents simply leave the districts, feeling hopeless about the situation. David Vives, NTD News.
Toyota is dumping the big V8 engine and the latest redesign of its Tundra pickup truck. A bold move that in a market that likes big, powerful engines. Here's more.
The 381 horsepower V8 will be replaced by a slightly more powerful V6. There will also be an optional gas-electric hybrid system offering 437 horsepower. The change is needed because of stronger U.S. fuel economy requirements that will soon be imposed under President Joe Biden, who is scrapping Donald Trump's rollback of the regulations. The old V8 got only 13 miles per gallon in the city and 17 on the highway. Toyota has not disclosed the estimated mileage for the new engines, but said they'll be more efficient and more powerful than the outgoing V8.
Tundra's new core powertrain offers impressive horsepower and torque that not only improves on the outgoing V8 in terms of performance, but also it's more efficient.
Ford, General Motors, and Dodge, which dominate the U.S. big pickup market, still offer V8 engines, which are often preferred for towing and hauling. Ford's F-Series pickup is the top-selling vehicle in the U.S.
The current generation, the previous generation Tundra, never really got much over about 100,000 sales a year, compared to about 900,000 F-Series a year.
Toyota says the new Tundra can tow up to 12,000 pounds and haul over 1,900 in its bed. The truck also gets new styling, a revamped interior, a new suspension and frame, and a weight-saving aluminum-reinforced composite bed. Prices haven't been released. The redesigned truck, a 2022 model built in San Antonio, Texas, goes on sale later this year.
A Russian company is using deepfake technology to make Russian actors look like famous American Hollywood actors with their permission. And that's not all the technology can do.
If you think this is Bruce Willis, you're wrong. It's an authorized deepfake. Russian company Deepfake used an artificial neural network to impose his image onto the face of a Russian actor. The ad should play well with people over the age of 35 who are familiar with the Die Hard movies Willis starred in. Branding and advertising experts estimate that Willis can get between $1 to $2 million for it. Deepfake technology opens up endless possibilities for the film industry, but has drawn some criticism over fears that political messages could be fabricated. Like this clip, for example, it's not Obama talking, but rather comedian Jordan Peele. Just take a look how real it seems.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things.
But the Russian company is going ahead with it, and they say it's not an easy thing to do.
The process of teaching neuron algorithm takes some time. The first video, a training one, takes about 15 to 17 days to make. However, after that, we can speed up the process and produce footage up to 4K resolution, something we're working on now, generating faces in 4K in 3 to 5 days.
The possibilities of using deepfake in video production don't end with replacing one actor with another. A Russian TV channel used deepfake services to make one of the actors look 15 years younger. In the episode, one of the characters was recalling the events that happened a long time ago when he looked much younger.
Coming up, a young pianist from Kazakhstan has won the prestigious Leeds International Piano Competition.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here with a new message about your Medicare benefits. You may be entitled to transportation, meals, and expanded coverage for dental work that includes extractions, fillings, and dentures, all at no additional cost. Plus, depending on your zip code, you may be entitled to the Medicare benefit that adds money to your Social Security check every single month. Call and get everything you deserve. Call now. It's free.
I'm on a fixed income, so I called to get money added to my Social Security check. They helped me so much.
I called to save money on copays, get prescriptions, transportation, and my dental work covered. I couldn't believe I was spending money I don't have to spend.
Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline, and you can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
A 23-year-old pianist from Kazakhstan has won the prestigious Leeds International Piano Competition, earning him a record deal and European tour. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
Kazakhstan-born pianist Alim Beysambayev began his musical career when he received a miniature toy piano for his 5th birthday present. Now at age 23, he's won the career-making Leeds International Piano Competition, beating 4 other finalists.
I'm still coming down from cloud 9, and really it's a wonderful feeling, and I'm so happy, but also unexpected, and yes, and looking forward to what will come next.
Held every 3 years, the competition had to adapt due to the pandemic. It held a virtual first round in April with no live jury or audience, and competitors performing in different locations.
I remember playing in the international first round and being quite nervous actually, because I hadn't played for an audience for a long time, or for anything that's that high profile.
The final rounds were held in Leeds, northern England. On Friday, Beysambayev performed Sergei Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, Opus 43, along with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra in front of a live audience.
The final was just unforgettable. Will probably stay with me for the rest of my life because of just playing for an audience. I think the audience, especially in Leeds, was so warm. But it's really, really special having that, and I think I was very, very lucky.
The winner of the first prize and Dame Fanny Waterman gold medal is Alim Beysambayev.
Beysambayev is the first pianist from Kazakhstan to win the Leeds. As winner, he gets the competition's Waterman gold medal and a $34,000 cash prize, as well as a package including a management deal, a record contract, and a European tour. Beysambayev also scooped the audience prize. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Australia has lost around 30% of its koalas over the past 3 years. A combination of drought, wildfires, and developers cutting down trees has hurt the iconic Australian animal. The Koala Foundation is now urging the government to do more to protect the creature's habitat. The foundation estimates the koala population has dropped to less than 60,000 this year from more than 80,000 in 2018. New South Wales in Australia's southeast has seen the steepest decline. Koala numbers there have dropped by over 40%. Huge wildfires burned through koala habitats there in late 2019 and early 2020. The Koala Foundation chair says the country needs a koala protection law and notes the figures of the animal's decline are probably worse than reported. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to catch all of our programs on TV. NTD Evening News is on every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Find your local NTD channel at ntd.com/TV.